The air inside the village chapel was heavy, filled with the weight of sorrow. The soft murmur of mourners blended with the rustling of clothing as people shifted in their seats, trying to find comfort in a space filled with grief. The scent of freshly cut flowers mixed with the faint smell of burning candles, creating an atmosphere that felt both familiar and unreal. Little Zara sat quietly on the wooden bench, her small hands clutching the fabric of her black dress. Her tiny shoes barely touched the floor. She had never been to a funeral before. Death was a concept she had seen only in the cartoons where characters would always wake up in the next episode. But now, as she looked at her mother's casket, adorned with bright roses, the truth crashed into her like a stone. Her mother, Akosua, lay inside the coffin, dressed in her favorite blue kente. Her hands were placed gently over her chest, but she wasn't sleeping. She wasn't ever going to wake up again. The realization tightened around Zara's chest, squeezing her heart. Her older brother, Kwame, sat beside her, offering her a quiet, steadying presence. His hand brushed against hers, reassuring her in a way words could not. On her other side, their grandmother, Nana Asante, held a tissue in one hand, dabbing at her eyes while whispering prayers for Akosua. People approached. The casket, some crying openly, others standing silently, heads bowed in reverence. The preacher's deep voice echoed through the chapel, speaking of Akosua's kindness, her strength, and her unshakable devotion to her family. Zara could barely hear the words. They felt distant, like they were coming from behind a closed door. All she could feel was the hollowness in her chest, the absence of her mother's laughter, the warmth of her touch. When Kwame nudged her gently, she realized it was time for them to say their final goodbyes. Her heart raced, and her breath grew shallow, but the warmth of Kwame's hand in hers gave her the courage to stand. Every step toward the casket felt impossibly heavy. Each step made the truth press down on her chest until she could barely breathe. When they reached the casket, Zara gazed at her mother's face. It was peaceful, almost as if she were only sleeping. But something was missing. The laughter, the stories, the way Akosua would hum softly while cooking dinner. Those eyes that always looked at her with love were now closed forever. A sharp fear pierced Zara's heart. What if she forgot her mother's voice? What if she couldn't remember the sound of her laughter? The thought made her panic, and she searched for something, anything, to hold on to. That's when she remembered the phone. Her mother's old mobile phone had sat untouched on the bedside table since the day she was taken to the hospital. It had always been there, always ringing, always bringing a familiar voice across the airwaves. Zara reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out the cool, smooth phone. She had taken it that morning when no one was looking. Holding it felt like holding on to a piece of Akosua that she could keep forever. Standing in front of the casket, Zara knew exactly what she needed to do. With trembling hands, she placed the phone gently beside her mother's hands, tucking it under the folds of the blue kente. Nobody noticed. Everyone was too wrapped in their own grief to see the little girl trying to hold on to what was already gone. The casket was closed, and the sound it made, a heavy thud, struck Zara's heart. Like a final blow, she would never see her mother again. A chill ran through her body, and she felt Kwame's arm wrap around her shoulders. Outside, the sky was overcast, a dull gray that made the air feel colder than it was. The cemetery was still, save for the rustling of the leaves and the occasional sniffle from the mourners. Zara clung to Nana Asante, her fingers grasping the folds of her grandmother's coat. She watched as the coffin was lowered into the earth, her mother being swallowed by the ground. People took turns tossing flowers and handfuls of dirt onto the casket, but Zara remained frozen, unable to move, unable to make sense of the emptiness. She felt inside. When Kwame placed a single white rose onto the grave, Zara forced herself to do the same. The petals were so small, so fragile against the dark earth, and for a moment they felt like the only things left of her mother. She barely heard the rest of the ceremony. Voices became distant, blurred by the overwhelming silence in her mind. She was led back to the car, as if in a dream. When they drove away, Zara looked back at the grave one last time. The fresh mound of earth stood as the only proof that her mother had ever been there. Thanks for sending part 2. I'll now rewrite this in simple, emotionally engaging African folktale style, keeping the same emotional beats and culturally grounded tone, while ensuring the word count is matched. Let's get started. Zara rested her head against the cool window pane, staring out into the world that seemed to be moving on without her. Outside, the day went on. People continued their lives, but inside her, everything had come to a halt. The house smelled different now, as if the air itself had changed. It wasn't just the absence of her mother's familiar scent of vanilla and jasmine that used to fill every room. No, it was something deeper, something that made everything feel colder, emptier. She sat on the couch, her legs curled beneath. Her eyes fixed on the living room. This was now supposed to be home, but it felt foreign. Nana Asante's house was not small, yet it seemed to close in on her. The walls felt as though they were pressing down, and the heavy furniture seemed darker, more imposing. The shelves were lined with old porcelain figurines and framed photographs of people Zara barely recognized. There were no bright cushions on the couch, no scattered crayons or toys. Everything was in its place, and that only made it worse. Zara had never spent more than a few days here, not even when her mother had been ill. They had always gone, back to their own home, where Zara's room was filled with colorful posters of cartoons and shelves stacked with stuffed animals. Now all of that was gone. It had been left behind in the apartment they had shared, but she hadn't been allowed to return after the funeral. The adults had packed everything away, keeping only what was necessary. She didn't dare ask where. Her toys were. It didn't matter anymore. Nothing felt the same without her mother. The first days after the funeral passed in a haze. Visitors came and went, bringing food, speaking in soft voices, looking at her with pity in their eyes. They would ask how she was feeling, but Zara never answered. She didn't know what to say. She spent most of the time sitting in a corner, watching the adults talk, their words drifting around her like a storm she couldn't escape. They spoke of arrangements, of papers that needed to be signed, of things Zara couldn't understand. Sometimes, Nana Asante would sit beside her, stroking her hair, whispering soft words that Zara couldn't quite hear. Kwame tried to distract her, bringing her books, suggesting they watch cartoons. But Zara didn't want to read. She didn't want to watch anything. She just wanted everything to stop, for time to pause, to hold on to something she could recognize. But the hardest part was the nights. Her mother had always tucked her in, smoothing the blankets down and pressing a kiss to her forehead before turning out the light. On. The nights Akosua worked late, she would call, and Zara would fall asleep listening to her voice. But now, there were no calls. No soft murmurings telling her that she was loved and that everything would be okay. The first night in her new room, Zara lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked with unfamiliar sounds. The bed was too big, too stiff. She turned to her side, pulling the blanket up to her chin, but sleep wouldn't come. In the dark, she reached out, searching for something to hold on to. Her fingers brushed the edge of a phone case on the nightstand. It wasn't the phone itself. Her mother's phone was buried now, beneath the earth. But it was something. Zara clutched it tightly to her chest, squeezing her eyes shut. The silence was unbearable. The next morning, she barely touched her breakfast. Nana Asante had made pancakes the way her mother used to, but they didn't taste the same. Kwame watched her from across the table, his fork poking at his food. His tired eyes were filled with concern, but he didn't say anything. He wasn't sleeping either. Nana Asante sighed, setting her cup of tea down. "You have to eat, sweetheart," she said gently. "You need your strength." Zara didn't answer. She wasn't hungry. After breakfast, she wandered through the house, looking at nothing, her feet carrying her without purpose. She stopped in the hallway where old photographs lined the walls. Nana Asante as a young woman, her mother as a little girl, then as a teenager, and finally, as an adult, holding baby Zara in her arms. Zara paused in front of that photo. Her mother looked so happy, so full of life. Zara reached out, her fingers tracing the outline of her mother's face in the picture. She wanted to remember everything: the sound of her mother's laughter, the warmth of her hugs, the way she used to hum while cooking. But the memories slipped away, like sand between her fingers. In the days that followed, Zara stayed mostly in her room. She didn't cry, not really. The tears had stopped at some point, replaced by an emptiness she couldn't explain. People kept telling her that it would get better with time, that she would feel better again. But Zara didn't believe them. How could she? Her mother wasn't coming back. One evening, as the sky outside turned dark, Zara overheard Nana Asante and Kwame talking in the kitchen. She knew they were talking about her, though their voices were low. "I'm worried about her," Nana Asante whispered. "She just needs time," Kwame said. "She's still processing everything." Zara turned away from the door, curling up on the bed. She didn't need time. She didn't need anything. She just needed her mother. That night, as she lay in the darkness, she wished for something, anything, to make her feel close to her mother again. And just as she was about to drift off to sleep, the phone on the nightstand buzzed. Zara's heart stopped. She sat up, her hands trembling as she reached for it. The screen glowed in the dark. One word appeared on the display: "Mom!" Zara's breath caught in her throat. The phone buzzed again, filling the room with sound. She hesitated, knowing it was impossible. Her mother's phone had been buried, lost beneath the earth. But still, Zara couldn't stop herself from reaching for the answer button. Zara had watched as the phone was placed inside the casket. She had seen it lowered into the earth, buried deep. But the next day, the impossible happened. The phone rang. Zara's heart stopped in her chest. She knew it couldn't be real, but she had to know. Taking a shaky breath, Zara pressed the button and lifted the phone to her ear. Silence filled the room, heavy and thick. Then a soft breath. A whisper. Her name. Zara froze, the phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her small fingers gripped the edges of the phone so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The room around her seemed to disappear, swallowed by the eerie silence coming from the phone. Zara could hear something faint on the other end, distant, like a soft breath against the receiver. It made her spine tingle. Then, a voice. It was faint, barely more than a whisper, but unmistakable. Her mother's voice. Zara. The name came through like a fragile thread, so soft that Zara almost thought she had imagined it. Her breath caught in her throat, her chest tightening. She wanted to speak, to answer, but her lips wouldn't move. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the call ended. The screen went dark. Zara stared at it, her heart pounding in her chest so loudly that she could hear it ringing in her ears. The silence of the room pressed against her, making everything feel heavier than ever. Her fingers trembled as she placed the phone back on the nightstand. She lay down slowly, curling herself under the blanket, her mind spinning. It had to be a mistake, right? Maybe she had imagined it, half asleep, caught between dreams and reality. But it had felt so real. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to steady her breath, but sleep didn't come easily that night. The next morning, Zara didn't tell anyone. She sat at the breakfast table, pushing the food around on her plate. Her grandmother asked if she wanted more syrup on her pancakes, but Zara didn't answer. Jaden sat across from her, his eyes still filled with concern, but he said nothing. The house was filled with the low hum of the radio in the background, the clink of dishes, and the occasional footsteps in the hallway. It all felt so normal. But Zara knew it wasn't. All day, she thought about the call. She wanted to check the phone again to see if there had been another missed call. But she was afraid of what she might find. Afraid of what she wouldn't. As the sun set and the shadows grew long, Zara retreated to her room. She sat on the bed, the phone resting beside her on the nightstand. Her eyes flickered to it every few minutes, not knowing what she was waiting for. Then, just as the clock struck 9 ball, the phone vibrated. Zara's breath caught in her throat. She didn't move. Her pulse thundered in her ears, her hands clenched tightly into fists in her lap. The phone buzzed again. Zara had to answer. It. She swiped her thumb across the screen and brought the phone to her ear, her hand trembling. Silence. The kind of silence that felt suffocating, pressing against her chest. She held her breath, waiting. Then Zara heard her name. Zara. It was her mother's voice. But it wasn't the same. It sounded weaker, more distant, as if it was coming from a place far away. The voice barely reached her. Zara's throat went dry. She tried to speak, but no words came. The line crackled faintly, and just like before, the call ended. The sharp beep echoed in her ear. Zara lowered the phone slowly, her fingers still shaking. She stared at the dark screen. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't just her imagination. Her mother was calling her, and she didn't know why. The next day, Zara could barely sit still. Every sound in the house made her jump. Every ring of the phone sent her heart into her throat. She avoided Jaden's eyes. She didn't want to talk to him. She just wanted answers. That night, she didn't wait for the phone to ring. She sat on her bed, the phone in her hands, her eyes fixed on the screen. Her fingers hovered over the call history. When she finally checked it, there was nothing. No missed calls, no record of her mother's number. But Zara knew. She knew it had happened at exactly 9 gwr. The phone buzzed again. This time, Zara didn't hesitate. She pressed the button immediately. Mom. The word slipped from her lips, a whisper before she could stop herself. There was a long silence on the line. A silence so thick, Zara almost thought the call had ended. And then, her mother's voice came through, clear and faint. Zara, where are you? Zara's breath hitched in her chest. She wanted to answer. She wanted to tell her mother she was here, to ask where she was. But before she could say anything, the call cut off again. The sharp beep echoed in the room. Zara sat frozen, pulling her knees up to her chest, hugging them tightly. She didn't understand what was happening. All she knew was that her mother was gone, but somehow she was still calling. Zara barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard her mother's voice again. It lingered in her mind, soft and distant, calling her name. It was like an echo from a place she couldn't reach. The silence in the house felt heavier than ever. The next morning, Zara couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over her. She didn't know what was happening. She didn't know if she even wanted to know. The calls weren't just making her sad anymore. They scared her. When she went downstairs, the scent of coffee and warm toast filled the air, but it did nothing to stir her appetite. Nana Asante was spreading jam on toast at the counter, and Jaden was scrolling through his phone. Neither of them noticed the way Zara hesitated in the doorway. She sat down at the table, staring at the untouched plate in front of her. Nana Asante glanced at her, her eyes soft with concern. You hardly ate yesterday, sweetheart, she said gently. Try to eat a little. Zara nodded, but she didn't. Pick up her fork. She wasn't hungry. Jaden looked at her, his eyes studying her face. You had another bad night? He asked quietly. Zara didn't answer. She knew he was right. She had spent most of the night lying awake, waiting for the phone to ring, but it hadn't. Maybe I should call your teacher, Nana Asante said, reaching across the table to brush Zara's curls away from her face. Tell her you'll stay home another week. I don't want to go back, Zara murmured, the first words she had spoken all morning. Nana Asante sighed. I know, baby, but staying in the house all day isn't good for you either. Zara didn't respond. Zara could feel the worry around her. Her family was concerned, but how could they help her when she didn't understand what was happening to herself? Nothing felt normal anymore. Not school, not home, nothing. She couldn't explain it, and she couldn't tell them about the calls. They wouldn't believe her. They'd think it was just her grief, playing tricks on her. So, Zara stayed silent, hiding the truth in the corners of her heart. By the time evening arrived, her stomach was tight with unease. She knew the phone would ring again. The thought of it sent a chill down her spine, but she had to be ready. So, when the clock struck 9:00, the phone vibrated on the nightstand. Zara was already waiting. With steady hands, she picked up the phone and pressed it to her ear before she could change her mind. The silence was thick, heavy. Then, a soft breath filled the air. Zara's pulse quickened. Zara, a voice whispered. Her fingers tightened around the phone as if to anchor herself. Where are you? The question hit her like a wave, and Zara's chest tightened. She needed to answer, to say something, but her lips wouldn't move. Another pause, then the line crackled. I don't know where I am. Zara's breath caught. This was different. The calls had always been the same soft voice asking the same things. But now it was different. Her mother's voice sounded uncertain, like it was coming from far away. It made Zara's heart race, and a chill spread down her spine. Before Zara could respond, the call ended. The screen went dark. Zara stared at it, her thoughts racing. What did that mean? How could she not know where she was? The silence in the room pressed down on her, suffocating. Zara's heart pounded in her chest as she stared into the darkness outside her window. Her thoughts raced, and she knew she had to find out the truth. She couldn't wait any longer. That night, Zara didn't sleep. The house around her was quiet, but inside she was anything but still. Her mind was tangled, caught in the confusion of the phone call. The pattern had changed. Her mother's voice, once distant but steady, had become filled with uncertainty. I don't know where I am. The words echoed in Zara's chest, sinking deeper into her, making her feel helpless. It felt like her mother was lost. Lost, somewhere, reaching out for something, someone. But how could that be? The dead didn't get lost. They didn't call. They didn't speak. Zara turned on her side, pulling the blanket up around her shoulders. The house was silent, pressing in on her. She should tell someone. She should tell Kwame, but what could she say? How could she explain that her mother, who had been buried in the earth, was still calling her at night? No one would believe her. They would say it was just her grief, playing tricks on her. So Zara stayed silent, keeping the truth locked in her heart. The next day passed like a dream, everything moving slowly and disconnected. Nana Asante asked if Zara wanted to go for a walk, to visit the park, or to the store to pick out a treat. Zara shook her head at each suggestion. Kwame came to her room in the afternoon holding a deck of cards. Remember when Mom taught us how to play spades? He asked, offering to play just the two of them. Zara wanted to say yes. She wanted to sit with him, pretending just for a moment that things were normal, that their mother wasn't gone, and the calls weren't happening, but she couldn't. So she shook her head. Kwame sighed but didn't push. He never did. Later that evening, Zara sat on her bed watching the phone. The house was quiet again, except for the distant hum of the television downstairs. She could hear Nana Asante talking softly on the phone. Zara didn't move. She waited. Exactly at 9 cow, the phone vibrated again. Zara's breath caught in her throat. She reached for it and pressed it to her ear as soon as she could. Silence. Then a soft breath. "Zara," her mother's voice called, just as it always had. But this time it was different. A pause. Then the words that chilled Zara to her bones. "I'm scared." Zara's fingers tightened around the phone. Her mother sounded different, not just lost, but afraid. Zara's heart raced. She swallowed hard, but her voice wouldn't come. The line crackled, and then the words Zara dreaded. "I don't know how to get out." The call ended, a faint beep filling the air. Zara pulled the phone away slowly. The screen was dark, but the words from the call, the fear in her mother's voice, wouldn't leave her. Her mother was calling from somewhere. But from where? What did it all mean? Zara could hardly sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard her mother's voice again, faint, lost, calling her name. The silence in the house was heavy, pressing against her like a weight. Zara tried to tell herself it wasn't real, that it was just her grief tricking her. But she knew it wasn't. Her mother was calling, and she didn't know why. The days passed, and Zara went through the motions of life, eating enough to keep Nana Asante from worrying. But inside, it was as if she were unraveling. The calls had changed everything. Her mother wasn't just calling anymore. She was reaching out from somewhere. Zara needed answers, but there was no way to explain it. One evening after dinner, Jaden came to her room. He had a deck of cards with him. "Do you want to play?" he asked. Zara looked at him, the familiar warmth of their shared memories threatening to break her. She shook her head. "Okay," he said softly, setting the cards down. Zara sat on her bed, her eyes fixed on the phone, the room around her quiet except for the faint hum of the television downstairs. She could hear Nana Asante's soft voice speaking to someone on the phone, but Zara didn't move. She waited, her breath held. Exactly at 9 the phone vibrated. Zara's heart skipped. She reached for it with trembling hands and pressed it to her ear. At first, there was only silence. Then, a soft breath. Then, a whisper. "Zara." Her mother's voice. The same voice, but different. Zara's fingers clenched tighter around the phone. "Where are you?" Her pulse raced. She had to say something. She wanted to speak, but her lips wouldn't move. The line crackled faintly. Then her mother's voice again. "I don't know where I am." The words sent a chill straight through Zara. This wasn't the same as before. Her mother's voice, once so familiar, now sounded lost, like it was coming from far away. Zara swallowed hard, the words lingering in her chest. The call ended suddenly, leaving only the soft beep of the phone. Zara stared at it, her mind swirling. What had her mother meant? How could she not know where she was? The house around her seemed to fade, becoming distant and blurry. Time passed, but Zara felt as though she was caught in a moment that would never end. She went through the motions of her day, answering when spoken to, eating just enough to keep Nana Asante from worrying. But inside, Zara was falling apart. The phone calls had changed everything. Her mother wasn't just calling anymore. She was calling out for help. The words, "I don't know how to get out," echoed in Zara's mind, repeating over and over like a song she couldn't escape. At first, she had thought her mother's voice was just a trick of her grief, a lingering memory that refused to let go. But now Zara wasn't so sure. It felt like something more, something desperate. She wanted to tell Kwame, to tell someone. But what would she say? She had no proof, no call history, no recordings, just a phone that had been buried deep in the earth, and a voice that came from it every night. No one would believe her. And so, Zara kept it to herself. That night she didn't wait in bed. She sat cross-legged on the floor beside the nightstand, the phone resting in front of her. The room was dimly lit by the faint glow of the street lamp outside. She watched the clock, the minutes ticking by. 9 now came. The phone vibrated just as it had every night. Zara grabbed it, her hands shaking. She answered quickly, almost without thinking. Silence. Then, the breath. Zara. The voice, softer than before. Zara's heart clenched in her chest. I'm so tired, her mother whispered. Zara's fingers tightened around the phone. She had never heard her mother sound like this before, not even in the hospital when the sickness had drained her. This wasn't the same. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was different. The static crackled on the line, and Zara's heart pounded so loudly she could feel it in her ears. She had to say something. She couldn't just sit there, frozen. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Mom? There was a long pause. Then her mother's voice came again, faint and soft. I have to go now. Zara's breath hitched in her throat. Go where? She wanted to ask, but the words wouldn't come. Then, a soft breath, a pause, and then the words that broke Zara's heart. I love you, baby. The line went dead. Zara lowered the phone slowly, her hands trembling. The words her mother had said hung in the air, settling in Zara's chest like a heavy weight. That was it. The last call. Zara knew with a quiet certainty she couldn't explain that it wouldn't happen again. She stared at the phone, waiting for the vibration that would never come. Her mother was gone, truly gone, and for the first time since the funeral, Zara allowed herself to cry. Not quietly, not hidden. She cried openly, freely, the way she had been afraid to cry before. This time she understood. This time she was ready to say goodbye. The house felt different after that night. No one would have noticed the change. Nana Asante still cooked breakfast every morning. Kwame still sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone. The television still hummed softly in the background, but to Zara, everything had shifted. There was no more waiting for the phone to ring at 9. No more dreading the sound of it vibrating in the dark. The silence that had once felt suffocating now felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted from the air. Zara still thought about the calls, about the voice on the other end of the line, about her mother's last words. I love you, baby. Zara carried those words with her, but she didn't tell Kwame or Nana Asante about the calls. The secret felt too fragile, too personal. She wasn't ready to speak it out loud, not yet. Maybe one day she would find the right words to explain it. But for now, she kept it in the quiet spaces of her mind, in the part of her heart where her mother still lived. Days passed, then weeks. Life moved on. Zara started going back to school. On the first morning, she hesitated in the doorway, clutching the strap of her backpack so tightly that her fingers ached. She hadn't been inside a classroom since before the funeral. The thought of sitting at her desk, pretending everything, was the same, made her stomach twist. But Kwame stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. You don't have to do everything at once, he said. Just take it one step at a time. One step was all Zara needed. She walked inside, and though things felt strange at first, she began to settle back into the rhythm of life. People looked at her with quiet sympathy. Their voices were softer when they spoke to her. Their smiles were careful. Zara didn't like it, but she understood. They didn't know what to say, and neither did she. Slowly, the days became easier. Zara started answering when people spoke to her. She raised her hand in class again. She sat with her friends at lunch, letting their stories fill the silence. She laughed, even though it felt unfamiliar. Some nights, when the house was quiet and she lay in bed, Zara still reached for the phone. Not because she expected it to ring, but because holding it in her hands made her feel closer to something she didn't want to lose. She didn't need the calls anymore, but she still held on to the memory of them, to the moments when she had heard her mother's voice one last time. One evening, Kwame knocked on her bedroom door, a deck of cards in his hand. "Want to play?" Zara hesitated for only a second before nodding. She sat across from him at the small wooden desk. The cards were spread between them, the familiar shuffle, the click of the plastic edges against the table. It felt like something from another lifetime. Kwame glanced at her. "Mom was terrible at this game, you know," he said. Zara smiled, the memory coming easily. "She always tried to cheat." Kwame grinned. "She was awful at it." Zara let out a small laugh, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel forced. The game began, and as the cards moved between them, something inside Zara settled. Her mother was gone, but she wasn't lost. She was here, in the stories they shared, in the warmth of the laughter that filled the room, in the love that remained. And Zara knew, with quiet certainty, that her mother would always be with her. In the deepest moments of grief, we sometimes feel that those we've lost are gone forever. But love transcends even death, and the memories we carry in our hearts will always keep them alive. The voice of a loved one can be a comforting reminder that they will always be with us, guiding us even when they are no longer physically present. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories like this.